Salutations, one and all, and welcome to RWBY Revisited. In this installment, let's examine the Faunus and the White Fang faction that is made up entirely of them. Please be aware that spoilers for all seasons will follow, and any material revealed or expounded upon in outside sources will not be weighted as heavily as that seen in the show. Also note that I will only be referring to material in the show itself. I am aware that many view this subject as a matter of allegory for real-world situations, but I do not delve into such matters, whether true or fictitious.
Ew, I like them!
Allegory.
That aside, let's get into it, shall we? So the Faunus are a sapient race that exists alongside humanity. Now, on our planet, we are the only species that exhibit our outside-the-box type of thinking, along with increased brain power. Now, don't mistake me, many species are incredibly intelligent, but none function quite the same as us. This set Remnant apart. There are two such races. Now, we humans eventually conquered the most desirable regions on our globe for ourselves. And then what happened? Well, we had been playing PvE up until that point, but once we weren't in constant danger from predators, we turned against each other and went full-on PvP. Really, tribalism is baked into the bones of our species. Unfortunately, our species as a whole is perpetually finding more and more reasons to put ourselves in boxes to fight every other box. It's incredibly stupid when you think about it. And that's when we're all of the same species. Imagine how bad that could be if there was a second to make that divide that much easier to visualize. And so this appears to be exactly what happened. The Faunus seem to be less numerous than humanity, and thus they don't appear to have been able to stand against them. But this does raise a few points. Firstly, it's confirmed that humans and Faunus are genetically compatible. What's more, this doesn't seem to produce sterile offspring, like a mule being created from a horse and a donkey. So despite any phenotypical differences, the genetics between humans and Faunus must be nearly identical. This even goes for Faunus that have features as drastic as fishtails instead of legs. Whether they are amphibious or still breathe only air is unknown. But many Faunus demonstrate traits and abilities that would require an organ system to operate, such as producing spider-like webbing or having a stinger tail. Offspring produced from this union are always Faunus, regardless of which parent was human and which was Faunus. This would indicate that Faunus genetics are the dominant genes here. To that end, this may have helped spur ancient humanity on Remnant to drive out the Faunus for fear of being bred out. It's easy to see why. Imagine being in an age where information isn't so readily available and technology is centuries behind our own. It wouldn't take much to see these beings as invaders, looking to drive you and those you care about away and supplant them.
If we can't get them out, we'll breed them out.
Add Grimm into the mix, and all of these factors are a natural powder keg waiting to go off. It was inevitable that tensions would come to a boiling point. Thankfully for Remnant, things are not as bad between the two races as they once were. It's still not perfect, not by a long shot, but at least the Faunus aren't enslaved or killed on sight or exiled, as was the case in times gone by. However, the Faunus are still treated as inferiors in some places. To what degree differs, but even those in well-off lands seem to either have faced resentment themselves or be aware of it happening to others. But what we see of this is a bit haphazard. Yes, we do see instances, such as Cardin bullying Velvet, but bullies will pick on anyone they deem as an easy target that won't fight back. There's also a no Faunus sign seen outside an establishment in Mistral, which is pretty awful, but we seldom see active mistreatment of Faunus. In fact, Marrow is a Faunus and a member of an elite squad of Atlesian military, where the Faunus are supposedly treated more poorly than in most other nations. There's never any resentment showed towards him amongst his peers for being a Faunus. You'd think that he'd be given point duty, or put on details that no one wants to do, but we never see any such thing. What's more, Blake is given full amnesty by Ozpin, Ironwood, and the like. She was a member of the White Fang, but those in power never press her about that matter. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean putting her to any harm, but you would think that the governing bodies might want to know if she has any knowledge to share about the faction she was once a part of. It would be like if someone defected from a terrorist organization, but was never brought in to spill everything they know. Given that her father was once the public leader of the organization, this wouldn't exactly be classified intel to those in power. On top of this, Menagerie seems to be a pretty well-off place, with a tropical landscape that seems like a great getaway. We're told about a harsh desert on the eastern side of the island, along with dangerous Grim, but we never saw any such creatures, and deserts can be settled in both our world and in Remnant. Vacuo is a prime example, and this brings us to how the White Fang came to be. After the Great War between the kingdoms, it was decided to grant Menagerie to the Faunus, but the resentment and abuse of those left in other lands did not dissipate, and eventually, the Faunus decided to do something about it. The initial founder of the White Fang was Gira Belladonna, Blake's father. Initially, they were a peaceful organization, but pacifism is a philosophy doomed to failure. All it takes is one person willing to harm a pacifist, and then they have no countermeasure. This led to splinter groups forming, and eventually Gira stepped down and was replaced by Sienna Khan. Under her leadership, the White Fang became increasingly violent until they were scarcely more than a terrorist organization. This led to those like Adam Taurus flourishing within their ranks. Despite his grandstanding, Adam showed time and time again that he was more interested in slaughter for his own amusement and amassing power more than actually helping the Faunus. This is like how, on a smaller scale, many activists can actually hurt the cause they claim to support. They can antagonize, harass, and even attack people who are minding their own business, which will only galvanize them against whatever it was the activists cared about, when they otherwise wouldn't have cared at all. Not only that, but they will then tell everyone they care about, which will then spur them to resent the movement as well. The White Fang are no different in this regard. Their indiscriminate violence only served as validation for any witnesses that the Faunus were bloodthirsty savages. Imagine if someone you cared about was killed by the White Fang. That probably wouldn't make you too interested in hearing about how supposedly peaceful they are, right?
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Though this does raise questions about how the White Fang were supplied. Before Adam's deal with Cinder, and by extension, Salem, how did they get their weapons and transport? They obviously had a dealer somewhere, but more information on that would definitely have been intriguing. Torchwick couldn't have been the only one in that game. Oddly enough though, the White Fang seemed to entirely collapse after the events of Haven Academy. They never made another showing, aside from Adam's last stand. If we were thinking realistically, then there would have been no shortage of others who would make a grab for that power without Adam and Sienna around. This could have led to the formation of factions that fought each other as much as they did humanity, with more or less noble intentions. But ultimately, the stakes of the plot were going to be raised with the new information about Salem that Season 6 had to offer, and the White Fang were a loose end that the writers simply discarded. The White Fang and the Faunus mistreatment subplot was just something that the show couldn't accommodate for, with the scale of the plot jumping forward with Salem, the Maidens, and the Relics. Creating a literal immortal villain sidelined anything else. But the bigger question is, from whence did the Faunus arise? They didn't exist alongside humanity's first iteration, and Ozma is surprised at their appearance. I am aware of a creation story for the Faunus, but that is a myth that they have for themselves, and is not supported by any evidence in the show itself. Whether humanity had to evolve from single-celled organisms, or if they were spontaneously generated is unclear, but whatever the case, it would seem as though the Faunus were part of it as well. Was it part of the God of Light's plan, or a fluke? We may never know. But I would like to thank you for watching. As a quick heads up, there will not be a RWBY Revisited next month. Instead, I'm working on a course correction video for the series as a whole, so be on the lookout for that. But what do you think about the Faunus and the White Fang? Were they a worthy addition to the series? Or were they unnecessary baggage that could have been done without? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and leave a like on this video if you're so inclined, and subscribe to see more. And may you all have a weapon in each hand.